Per usual, we'll get started in 5 to 10. So if you need to go to the bathroom and grab a glass of water, we'll just give everyone some time to jump in. But thank you all for being here. And also thank you, Matthew, Takara. I messed it up again. Sorry. If you can turn on your camera like they have, we would appreciate that so that our panelists, Eli, Courtney is here, and Batman will be able to see who they're talking with. It's much appreciated. Hey, Batman, good to see you. Thanks for joining. He's dialing on his phone.
Yeah, it's joined audio.
No problem.
It's my technically my night, I guess. Been working
We got
Australia
you.
hours.
You're working what hours?
Like Australia hours, so it's
Okay.
like now is my night.
Okay. Well, thanks
like
for thanks for joining. We'll hear more about that shortly, hopefully, in the situation. But thank you for the flexibility and
yeah, of course.
As mentioned, for the SageCore people in the channel, if you can turn on your camera. Noah, I know you have got some camera issues. Thanks for being here. Matt, thank you. Both Matts. Sarah, Sophia, Agnes. When we get started, we'll get started 5 after. Give everyone, some stragglers, a few minutes to join, but just so the panelists can see who they're talking to. It looks like it might be an intimate group, which is great. We can make it a bit more informal and a bit more question-oriented for you all, and just see where the conversation goes. But obviously, we'll structure it a little bit as we normally do. So cool. Sweet. How's everyone's day going? Pretty well. Thumbs up. Megan's is going well. Nice. Thumbs up. Cool.
How's your day, Jacob?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. It's sunny day in Chicago, so.
Yeah, 2 thumbs up. Yeah, no issues. I'll go on a little walk after this.
There you go.
Fresh air, you know. But it's a good day. Cool. We'll get started in a second. I'll just post one more last call to our site channels. All right, cool. We'll give you a minute to come back, and then we'll get started with some introductions. Thank you. Yeah, so just for the remainder, Jay, Solomon, Rory, Agnes, Sarah, Emma, if it's George, if it's possible to turn your camera on, since we got a small group, that'd be appreciated. If not, no worries, but definitely recommend it so you can see who's going to be talking to you all, and they can see you. But sweet, Eli's back. We'll get started. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panelists, Courtney, Eli, and Batman, for making time during their day and evenings, or bodily circadian rhythm evenings, if in Batman's case. So, you know, as usual, you know, this is the Careers in Finance panel. Some of you may recognize Eli from our alum panel at the beginning of the cohort, beginning of the summer. And obviously, currently, he's working on an entrepreneurial endeavor, which he can talk about. But before that, he was in finance, and I'll let him introduce himself shortly. So he's got important information for you all. So, but without further ado, I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. Batman, since you're unmuted, why don't you go first and give everyone a little bit background of you, when you did Sage Core, and where you are now.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Batman Lai, or Batman. As you guessed, I did Sage Core summer 2016, my sophomore summer. And since then, I am now working at a financial services consulting company in New York, 2 years out of college, majored in econ. Yeah, anything else?
Just the name of the firm, I guess, for everyone, so they know.
Oh yeah, Novantis.
Cool. Thanks. Courtney, why don't you let everyone know your story?
Hi. It's actually pretty similar to Batman. So I went to the University of Chicago. I graduated in 2018, and I did Sage Core in Australia in I think it was 2016, my sophomore summer. I worked at a mental health tech startup there, which I absolutely loved. It was the best experience. And now I work at JPMorgan in equities. I do equity derivatives, specifically Delta One hedging, which gets a little niche, but I can talk about that later if anyone's interested.
Cool. And without further ado, Eli. You're muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
Hey everyone, I'm Eli Wallace. I graduated from Northwestern University in 2018. I studied history there, and I was in Sage Core I did Sage Core in 2016, and I worked in Dublin, Ireland. I worked at a startup called Accionista there. And after I graduated Northwestern, I worked in San Francisco at JPMorgan as a commercial banker. I worked there for 12 months, and about 12 months ago, I left JPMorgan to start my own company, which is called Wallace White, and we make sports watches. And yeah, that's me.
Sweet. Awesome. So we've got a couple JPMorgan, one alum, one current there, and Novantis financial consultant here. And so we'll keep the structure pretty open since it is a smaller group today. So if you have questions, we want them to be asked. We won't do breakout rooms. We'll give enough time for everything to be answered. But I think what's probably most interesting initially is that gap from college to moving into a career in finance and kind of arriving at that point. So just for a starting point, I'd love to talk about, actually, I'm going to backtrack a minute. Because it is such a small group, I think it would benefit if the students are able to introduce themselves to you, and we can make it a bit more personal than we have in the past, and you can get to know who you're talking to and maybe why they're interested in finance or why they're here today. And then we'll jump into the panel. Shouldn't take too long. So that said, now that I've backtracked and covered my own tracks, let's start with Matt Pfeffer, and then we'll go down from there.
Sure. So my name's Matthew Pfeffer. I am a rising senior at Brown studying economics. As to why I'm here, I've had 2 past internships in the financial services sector. It was something that sort of I became interested in, really helping companies achieve their strategic goals. And I've always found it interesting and fun really to work on deals and have that. I find that to be sort of an exciting experience. So that's why I'm here today.
Awesome. Let's also add, let's just add where we're working this summer for each of us as well.
Sure. So I'm working at a venture capital firm called 27 Ventures.
Awesome. Thanks.
Wait, can we add country? Where are you working?
Oh, the firm's based in Hong Kong, but because.
Oh, right.
Everyone's remote this summer.
Oh.
Which is, yeah, it's obviously not the same, but they're still getting some global work experiences. So 27 Ventures, as Matt said, is based in Hong Kong. So they're still getting global work experience, but from their home. All right, Takara, just correct me.
It's Takara, you had it right.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
I'm Takara Askew. I go to school at Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago. I'm a rising 4th year, majoring in global studies, minoring in chemistry and information technology management. I'm not I wouldn't say I'm interested in finance, but I definitely have been not able to come to as many like webinars as I wanted to. So I just really wanted to check this out since I don't know as much about like the finance sector. And I am interning at Peanut Butter, which is a student loan assistance company based in Buffalo, New York.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go. Kevin, Matt, Sophia.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin. I am a rising sophomore at Yale. And currently, I'm interning at a venture accelerator called Brink. So in my personal experience, I found that, especially as a freshman, it was very difficult to find places who were willing to take someone with such a lack of experience, I guess. And I found it very difficult to sort of break into the field. And that's why I found this internship opportunity so valuable. It's because it's a really great opportunity to get that first sort of hands-on and industry experience from which I can then build off of. So yeah, very grateful, very excited for this.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
What's up, Kevin?
Hey, Batman. We've chatted before.
Yeah, I did introduce you guys. Thanks for that again, Batman. Matt.
Yeah, just graduated actually from Hamilton College in upstate New York. This summer I'm working for a company that's based in London called Keg Tracker. They monitor and track kegs, beer kegs. I'm interested in finance because I've had internships in the past in the asset management industry. I like reading market news, so just trying to find something to apply that in the real world.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a rising sophomore at Claremont McKenna College. Sorry, my major there is economics, financial economics, and French. Currently, I'm working at a small fintech company called Peanut Butter with Takara. This company basically helps employers offer student loan assistance as a benefit, and it's based in Chicago. And yeah, I'm excited to learn more about finance.
Awesome. Rory, Noah, George.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Rory Mcdermott. I'm a rising senior at Cornell University. I'm majoring in fiber science and apparel design and minoring in business. And I'm interested, first, I'm working at Spotivity out of Chicago this summer, which is a dual-sided marketplace that connects teens to after-school programs and opportunities outside of normal school hours. And I'm interested in finance because I'm very involved in VC in my on campus at Cornell, and I have a ton of friends who have gone more traditional finance routes. So I want to get more of an idea of what that's like and if that's going to be the career for me or not.
I'm Noah. I'm majoring in economics and minoring in psychology at Brandeis University. I'm a rising senior, and I'm interning at GoLogic Solutions as a business development intern out of Chicago.
Awesome.
Hello, everyone. My name is George. I'm a rising senior at Yale. I double major in data science and economics. And this summer, I'm interning in a venture capital firm called Iron Pillar, which has its address in Mauritius, but has personnel in India and in the US. So far, in the past, I've been doing only data science internships, and I was most focused on the data science part of my degree. But starting this year, I became more interested into finance, more specifically public finance. And I found this industry to be a really good starting point to break through to future opportunities in this area.
Awesome. Agnes and then Rohan, and then we'll just jump in.
Hi, everyone. My name is Agnes. I'm a rising senior at Cornell, majoring in statistics and minoring in business. Interning at BizIntro, a software company that manages networks. And I've mostly been interested in the finance industry, and I'm excited to learn more about it.
Hey all, first off, thanks for having me. My name is Rohan. I'm a rising junior at Michigan. I'm interning at Wealthy right now, which is a health tech startup. I'm really starting to focus in on product management and growth strategy right now, as well as traditionally business development, which has been a great experience, and I'm really thankful for it so far. But I'm here today because I'm really interested in the strategy and finance intersection, particularly thinking about private equity, venture capital type roles in the long run. So it's going to be great to learn more about finance as a whole today.
Cool. Awesome. So thanks for the introductions. And you know, like I said, we've got a small intimate group, so now everyone knows who we're talking with, so we can keep it informal. We can ask questions as we go, but I think the starting point, as I mentioned, is kind of landing that role in finance and how you get there. Kevin kind of hit at it. It's hard to break in without a lot of experience. You all did Sage Core and post-college were able to land roles. So I think from a starting point, I'd like to just discuss what you did while you were, you know, rising junior, rising senior, or on campus during those years to land an internship in finance or land a full-time role, like the process of attending events and networking and things like that, and what your experience was to put yourself in position for the job post-college. So hope that's clear. If anyone wants to have at it, they can jump forward. Otherwise, I'll pick someone, obviously.
I can start.
Cool.
So yeah, I interned at Sage Core as a sophomore, and then I got my internship at JPMorgan as a junior. I think being on the other side now, like when I was going through the interview process, I thought like everyone else has this like asset management experience or specific experience that I didn't have, and I was worried that might affect me in the interview process. But I think that's actually a huge misconception now, being on the other side and doing interviews. I think actually finance has changed a lot, and I think that they're looking more than ever for diverse experience. And I think it was actually a huge asset for me being able to talk about how I worked in this like very unique startup culture, because I think specifically in markets, what I do, a lot of it is like a startup, like different teams function. It's like fast paced and you're all hands on deck and everyone's trying to pick up different jobs. And I think it's more about how you position and prepare for, like position your personal experience and how you prepare for the interview than it is like the specific path that everyone has. Like, I think any job you do, especially any Sage Core job, there's so much experience that can be drawn from it. So just think about the job that you're interviewing for and how you can position your previous experience. And I think you shouldn't be worried that you don't have like the technically right experience. Like, it's all about how you position it and how you prepare.
Awesome. Devin, why don't you jump in?
Yeah. I've said a bit of this to Kevin, but for me, the biggest thing, totally agree with what Courtney said. Biggest thing was having that Sage Core experience, which I think at the end of the day, it did differentiate my resume and what I could speak to, because if everyone was doing a similar, you know, going in, have a similar background in finance, then you really have an opportunity to stand out. And I think using your Sage Core experience, especially a lot of you are going into it to take on independent projects, some sort of, you know, thing that proves that, you know, you are being proactive and able to really take on your own and work in small groups, fast-paced, all those things that come in hand at the end. I think you should be thinking ahead and thinking of, you know, how can I use this experience to really, one, get the most out of it, but make sure that down the line I can leverage it as well. So.
And then Eli, why don't you take the question through the lens of like going to the networking events and landing that either internship or full-time offer, and how you were able to position yourself that way?
Yeah, so I would say one big piece is to leverage your alumni networks. Like, you guys all introduce yourselves, and you all go to some great universities, and I'm sure that a lot of your alumni work at some great firms that you'd probably like the opportunity to work at if you're interested in finance. And so for me, what I did at the time was I would just, you know, go on LinkedIn and basically just filter for people who graduated from my university and were working at a firm that I was interested in. And then also, like, you know, if I knew someone on campus who was maybe in my fraternity or in an on-campus organization, I would just reach out to that person and schedule a phone call or something like that. And then another piece, I agree with what Courtney and Batman said, which is basically to connect the experiences, whatever experiences that you have had in the past, connect them to the role that you're interviewing for. for example, I studied history, which is not, I mean, people don't really think that that is directly applicable to finance generally, but I was able to tell a story about how it was. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Good advice. I think moving down that line, last week we did a careers and consulting panel, and we talked a bit about the interview process, which is similarly probably intense as a career in finance, but there are some nuances with case interviews and things like that. And I think it's important that everyone here understands what that process is like for a career in finance, and what the interviews, right, from a behavioral to a more specific, are like. So let's go in reverse order and talk about what those entailed, and kind of pull back the curtain on the process of getting to that offer via the interviews.
Yeah. So what the interview's like?
Yeah. That's ultimately the question. I don't know if it's multiple. I didn't work in finance, so I can't speak to whether there's multiple stages. You had one interview, and then, or if you met with multiple people. What is a super day, right? That's a big thing. So
yeah. So yeah, I guess the interview, from my experience, there were a few different rounds, and yeah, there were a technical portion of it, and also a non-technical portion. But one piece of advice I would say is to reach out to, like, if you were to interview, if you know who you're going to be interviewing with, or if you know what office you'll be interviewing with, reach out to like people at the office, even if it's just cold emailing them, or if you know someone who works there or something like that, and just try to schedule a phone call with them before the interview. Ask some questions about the interview, or just ask some questions about the role. And I think just whatever you can do to go in warm, it's very helpful. That's one piece of advice.
Awesome. Batman, what about you? What was your interview process like?
Yeah, so pretty, it was more case oriented, but similar structure, your technical, and then Super Day, which is, now I think with COVID, probably all be remote, but usually you're interviewing with a more senior crowd and seeing, more fit questions. And it's really an opportunity for you to also see what their side is like, and see if, you see yourself working there, and it goes both ways. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a super important consideration. We get very caught up in, well, I have an opportunity to work at JPMorgan, or I have an opportunity to work at Navantis, and it's a possibility that the firm's not the right fit for you. So while, yes, it would be great to get that on your resume, there are multiple institutions where you personally might align with the work culture, the people there. As you go through an interview process, you start to see that there are distinct cultures. While the work is similar, there are distinct cultures in each place. And so it is important to take that into consideration and not get married just to the name, but make sure you're going or interviewing in a place that you feel comfortable. Courtney, do you want to kind of pull back more of the technical stuff? Like, what are some of the things that they can do to prepare themselves, the questions that you were asked, if you remember specifically, and the skills that you were kind of tested on?
Yeah. So the way my interview process worked, and the way it generally works in markets at bigger firms, is you have 2 phone interviews before your super day. And I would say the phone interviews are always more conversational. They're just trying to get to know you and make sure behaviorally you're a good fit. Generally, the most intense technical question you'll get on any phone interview would be like, what's going on in markets, just to make sure you at least have some idea of what you're interviewing for. But nothing will be too technical until the super day, in which case you'll have generally like 3 or 4 interviews, and 1 or 2 will be more technical than the other 2. In my experience, and the experience I've had interviewing on the other end, is that JPMorgan, and I'm sure a lot of the big firms, give their interviewers a sheet of questions to answer. Some are technical and some are behavioral. And I find that the more I'm reading off the sheet, the less I'm actually getting to know the person I'm interviewing. And the more they make it a conversation and ask questions about me, the more I come away from the interview feeling like they're engaged and like I actually got to know them. So I would say like as much as you can in the interview process and to avoid the really hard technicals, try to make it like more like a conversation, make yourself seem interesting. Like you're all working for global companies. That's like instantly an amazing talking point, and the person will be bored of hearing about like different like asset management paths because they've heard about that a million times. So the more you can like leverage that experience to make it a conversation and make the person engage, the more it'll be a conversation and a dialogue rather than them reading questions off a sheet. That being said, there will be some interviewers like I had that just don't want to have a conversation with you and want to ask you technical questions. And in markets, it's really hard to have technical questions other than like general statistics and brain teasers. I got a statistics question. I don't even remember what it was. It was something with dice. And I instantly like froze up. I was like, I have no idea what the answer to this question is. So I took a step back and like, I would say once again, I tried to make it more like a dialogue. I was like, okay, can I have a piece of paper? Can I have a pen? I'm stuck on this first step. Here's how I'm thinking about it. And like kind of giving the question back to the interviewer so they could help me with like the step that I was stuck on, and then continuing through and explaining my thought process. I think the worst thing you can do in any interview is just like say you don't know or just like freeze up. Like you don't even have to be right. You just have to have a thought process that kind of makes sense. And look, and a lot of the questions are just making sure you can handle like the pressure of the scenario. And so I would say it's less about being right and more about just having a thought process and being calm and asking the right questions. And like, they're never going to fault you for taking your time and having a piece of paper and thinking it through. Like, that's not the problem. The problem is if you crack under pressure and just say you don't know and freeze up.
Yeah, I would say on that point, you're really like simulating, a lot of times, let's say when you're interacting with clients, they're gonna have a million questions that you're not gonna know the answer to. And at the end of the day, as you get more senior, the biggest skill you end up developing is being able to answer those questions you don't know the answers to, while making it seem like you know the answer, deflecting, or whatever you want to call it, but not cracking under pressure, like Courtney said. And yeah, I think that in the interview is what is stimulating. So
yeah.
Also, like a last thing, a tip I give a lot of the people that I do these panels with at JP is have something that like makes you stand out or like that is interesting, so that when you're doing the follow-up emails, you can be like, you can reference that. So like mine that I used a lot was that I went to circus camp and I knew how to juggle, and like we would always have like a really quick conversation about that. I'd slide it in somewhere in one of the questions, and then in the follow-up interviews I'd always be like, oh yeah, like still working on my juggling or whatever, just so, because they interview so many people, to have that one thing that stands out so they can remember in the thank you email, like, oh, that was the girl that juggles. Like just something that can make you stand out so they'll want to respond to your email. Because after a super day, when I'm getting like 40 emails, I'm like, I don't know who's who or what we talked about. So it's nice to have that little thing that'll just trigger their memory. So even like, it doesn't have to be as crazy as juggling, but even like Matthew, like I'm working for a company in Hong Kong. Like that's a really cool thing that like a lot of people don't do. So you could just reference that and then reference it in your thank you email.
It's great advice from everyone. And there's a few things that are common threads that we've heard in the past, right? First thing in an interview, the person across the table from you is a person. They have their own interests as well. And the more you can appeal to that, the more you get in a situation like Courtney mentioned, where you're just having a conversation with someone and you're not necessarily being tested on your skills. To that end, make sure you're reading the room and the person across from you wants to have that conversation. If you're with someone who's more technical and they're not engaging, like don't keep trying to beat down that door, because that person won't receive it. They'll be like, I'm trying to ask you questions, stop, just focus on the topic, and that could turn them off. But ultimately, I think that's been a thread both through finance and what we talked about with consulting last week, for those of you who were there. And so it's important to keep that in mind as you enter the interview process. And lastly, if you're thinking to yourself, crap, what makes me unique? What makes me different? Like, try not to think too hard. Think back to just what you're interested in individually. The answer is usually right in front of you. You don't need something grandiose or super out there. It's just something that you are passionate about individually, and that you've had a differing experience from someone else, and that's your thing. It doesn't have to be manufactured or thought on too hard. So, because I know there is that kind of imposter. You immediately start to think, what's my thing? What makes me unique? Oh, I just like sports. Like, that's not enough. Don't get into that habit. Just let it reveal itself to yourself through your life. Cool. So great advice on landing the job and interviewing. while we have the job, what is it like to actually work in finance, right? There's myths which are true. They're not myths, that you work long hours, you know, that you are on call, that you're responding to clients. And I think it's important that we reveal some of those, you know, lifestyle elements of a career in finance, because that's part of the game, right? You're compensated for that as well, which is part of the life as well. So I think we need to have just an open conversation of that balance. And if there's any questions that you all have specifically about this, about what it's like to work a day in the life, feel free to chime in as we have this conversation, because I think it's important too. Batman, why don't you start with this one? Because you're more financial consultant, right?
Yeah.
Additional JPMorgan, so maybe reveal what that is like. Obviously, you don't know the other experience, but just feel free to chat away.
Yeah. So my role is more of consulting in the financial services sector. So my clients are all financial institutions, while my role is more advisory driven. That said, you know, every 2 to 3 months I'll be working on something new. It's pretty exciting stuff that and timely. So I think when in March, a lot of the work I was doing was around the impact of COVID on consumer behavior and deposits. What happens if rates go negative, stuff like that. So you're still in the financial space, but also while approaching it from a more management consulting angle. But job-wise, I'd say I spend half the day on analysis and half the day on interpreting the analysis and client-related work. So that's a really, I think it's a pretty solid overview of actually what I do. And the analysis portion can be broken up into, like, you know, SQL, Excel, data problems, and then storytelling, the other half. Yeah, I can go into that if you have more questions, but
no,
overview.
Good starting point. Eli, how about you? When you were in your 12 months, what was your day in the life like? How much of it was balancing networking within the firm with your responsibilities at the firm, things of that nature?
Yeah, usually I would get in around 8 a.m., 8:30 or something like that. And I would get out about 6 or so. Maybe sometimes I would stay later than that if I was on a project or something like that. And then what I did, my days are kind of broken down into kind of similar to what Batman said, client management. So just like, and yeah, like emailing client about, you know, maybe we were about, yeah, just communicating with the client about something that we're working on. And then the other part of it would be like doing the actual work. So whether it be like doing some projections on Excel, or putting together a pitch deck on PowerPoint. Yeah, and there was also, I got involved. I tried to be involved in the office as much as I could. And so I would like organize happy hours and holiday parties and stuff like that. And so I guess a portion of my time was devoted to that as well.
Awesome. And then Courtney, you know, you maybe there's an opportunity to jump a little bit more on the technical side that you prefaced earlier, but right in the derivatives market and things. What is your day like? So maybe you're more in the weeds, right?
Yeah, finance is so different. Like both of your jobs sound so different than mine. Like logistics wise, I usually get in at like 6:30 and I leave at like 7. So it's a pretty long day, and you're in markets, you're glued to your desk pretty much all day. Just one like myth before I go into day-to-day, particularly in markets, but even in banking, there are so many different, like just saying markets or even equities, like there's like 30 teams that sit on my floor and they all do completely different things. So when you're interviewing for like a markets position, you can find almost anything you'd be interested in. And then in terms of like mobility at big firms, you can move to different desks if something isn't working for you. So yeah, like the general myth, I think, is that all markets is X or Z type of way. Like it's all so different. But the common themes I'd say across different teams, is that it is obviously really, really fast paced. So you have to be someone, I've never worked on a project for longer than 2 days, maybe. Like it's always just really quick, checking things off a to-do list type stuff. My job in particular is, and I feel like a lot of jobs in finance, it's a lot about relationships, both internally and externally. So when you're an analyst, you're trying to develop your relationships internally. So people will be coming to you for questions, and then you'll develop a client base that way. And then externally, like going to SoulCycle or doing whatever things, like I have a wine tasting with clients tonight. So those are like the perks of the job, but obviously you have to get to a point where you have those developed client relationships enough that they want to do things with you and they want to come to you for different questions. I also think there's so many myths around like technical type stuff. Like I studied law in college and I was like, I do not want any sort of quant related job. Like I'm not interested in that. And nowadays I think, yeah, you do have to do, even in my job, which is really quant heavy, so I don't know how I ended up here. It's still all pretty like generally basic number stuff, and they'll teach you everything you need to know on the job. So having some sort of like, maybe I've taken a stat class or taken some sort of having a little bit of math background, but I think you shouldn't shy away like I did from quant heavier roles, especially as young people, like going in and saying like, I'm really interested in doing something with numbers. Like that a lot of times like will throw people off guard. Like being interested in trading or being interested in doing a more quant job, I think gives you an edge because people often are scared of those. And so we'll say they want like a more qualitative job, but it's really not that difficult of quant nowadays. Like machines run a lot of regressions and analysis for you. It's more about like just client relationships at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you for the overview. And clearly, as you alluded to at the very beginning, right, just such a different workday from Eli and what Batman have discussed, but all within the same industry. And so it's important to understand that. While we're on the topic of like day in the life and workday, do you all have any questions for anyone about whether it's managing client relationships in your workflows or a day in the life of finance? And that would be a great time to hone in on maybe some of your anxieties or areas of excitement when it comes to a career in finance. So don't be afraid to ask something. Go for it, Rory, if you have a question.
Hey, yeah. So I'm just wondering, in each of your personal opinions, what is the most difficult or like least, the part of your job that you like the least, and then versus the part of your job that you enjoy the most, or what's like the easiest for you?
Whenever someone's ready, jump in. No put on the spot.
I mean, I think the obvious answer of the part of my job I like the least is just the long hours and being glued to your desk. It's something that definitely takes getting used to. And I think as you get more senior, you can be more lenient, and work from home has definitely changed it, but it does get really difficult. And there are days when you're like, wow, I haven't seen the sun in weeks, and it's the worst. And I hate that personally because I need to be moving around and doing things. But there are a ton of perks, obviously, too. Let me think about my favorite part of the job. Someone else answer their least.
Yeah, I'll answer with my favorite. I would say I think other people have alluded to this or mentioned this, but you're always just learning. So, out of college, a lot of times you end up not really using your major out of the job, but I feel like I've actually been able to leverage a lot of the theoretical components of my econ major, which I didn't think I would ever need. And a lot of my job is like having to read random research papers to learn, from a theoretical perspective, what should happen and what is actually happening and why is that this and that there. So sort of just always learning something new. That's, I think, good in any job. Least favorite, you're at the mercy of the client's hours. So as I mentioned at the beginning, my business day starts at 3 p.m. and ends around 4 a.m. So I'm sleeping the other hours after that, and then just shifting my life, I guess, sort of around those like Australia working hours.
Wow. Eli, how about you? Favorite or
Yeah, my least favorite part of the job was the hours, I would say, like Courtney said. And then my favorite part was probably, I worked at a large firm, JPMorgan, and so there was a class of analysts that were, like my age, and there were about 10 of them or so, and I got to become pretty good friends with them. And so it was nice, and we had kind of it was a nice camaraderie aspect of it, and I really enjoyed that. And some of them I even still talk to today, although I'm no longer at the firm. So yeah.
Awesome. I think that's a strong component is especially with the long hours, right? You're spending a lot of time with the same people. And so it comes back to the interview, as Batman mentioned, make sure you're a fit for the firm and that they're a fit for you. Because if you're working long hours and you don't think you get along with the people, well, you're stuck working long hours with those people. So you want to make sure that they're people you want to spend time with and hang out with. And that's part of what the interview process is. They're also assessing that because they're on the flip side saying, this is a new analyst on my team that I'm going to spend a lot of time with. It's just someone I can, eat dinner with and have a real conversation, not about finance, not about work, and enjoy my time. So keep that in mind as well. And I think something Batman mentioned is really important for where all you are at in your career. And kudos to you for joining SageCore. Obviously, no bias in that statement, but optimizing for learning is a really important thing to do early on in your career, wherever you are. You have a real ability to be flexible and intentional about what you choose to do after college or during college. And it's important that you're always acquiring new skills or acquiring new knowledge in those decisions you make. And if you feel like you leave college and find a career and don't feel like you're learning enough, it might be time to look in the mirror and say, is it time for me to find something new and find a career that really pushes me and challenges me? Because the older you get, the more set you are going to get in your ways. It's just the inevitability of life. And so really having that growth mindset early and putting yourself in those positions is important. And I think, as all three mentioned, a career in finance allows you to develop the econ skills or quant skills that you maybe didn't have the ability to touch on while you studied history or political science or something else. So that transitions nicely, and then we'll open up to questions. The last little bit I want to talk about is with finance, right? 2 of you are still in the industry, 1 of you have left. But a big thing is the skills you gain and kind of the exit opportunities or what's next, right? I think once a trader, always a trader, but and you carry that with you. But there's also the career path that who was it that mentioned about VC and private equity, and that that's the life after you do your time. So I'd love to talk about, for you all, the specific skills you've gained if you haven't mentioned already, and then ultimately the exit opportunities that come with finance. Obviously, Eli, you started your own company, so you can dive more into what led to that. But why don't Fatman or Courtney, you start with just where you see your career arc? Obviously, you're not leaving, you're at your firm, but ultimately, with the skills you gained, what opportunities might come that intrigue you? To summarize all that.
For starters, I think obviously the question is always at least where I went to school, investment banking or markets, and everyone would always say, well, investment banking, you have all these exit opportunities. You can go to venture capital or private equity or whatever, and there's no exit options in markets. And that's just couldn't be further from the truth. So I just want to debunk that right away. The most common path, I would say, well, one, people leave less, I think, because they're a little less miserable. So a lot of people do have long careers at big banks or doing what they're doing at a smaller shop. But then the other exit opportunities all are around hedge funds and different things. So you can do what I'm doing, but on the client side, which is the natural path of a lot of people, especially young people nowadays. A lot of people from my analyst class are already starting to look at going to hedge funds or eventually becoming portfolio managers and managing their own books and doing things like that. So yeah, debunking the idea that markets doesn't have exit opportunities, that's just completely false. Yeah, but I think there are a million opportunities. Eli's starting his own business. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. I would love to do something like that. I don't know personally what my career path will be. Right now I'm really happy where I'm at, but eventually you can always go back to school or do whatever. So there shouldn't be so much pressure on your first job and like where you're going to go next. I think careers are so much more up and down than they once were.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, for sure. And not to have assume that once you're a trader, always a trader. More that was about the mentality of a trader and having those skills. I think you see they carry it through. Eli, why don't you dive into, taking a risk, going from JPMorgan, being there, having, this job that people covet and saying, I'm, ready to take a leap and start a business and that process for you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Courtney. That was very nice of you. So a couple of things that I learned from my job my previous job that apply to what I'm doing now, which is building my own company. I worked a lot with Excel and PowerPoint, and those skills actually turned out to be pretty useful. Like when I was fundraising for my company, I had to put together I put together a PowerPoint deck, and I put together a lot of those while I was working at my previous job. And so that was very helpful, being able to use that as a tool to communicate. And then also, like, I made projections for my company, because sometimes investors are interested in seeing those. Yeah, so I was able to do that pretty well. And also, like, banks wanted to see them sometimes too, like if you apply for a loan. And then, another thing is, at my role, I worked a lot with the companies that I worked with while I was at JPMorgan. They had revenue of between like $50 million to about $1 billion. And some of those companies are actually relatively young, maybe like they have been around for just a few years or something like that. And so I was able to work with these companies, and I learned a lot about them. And I saw like the rate at which they would grow. I saw like the different industries that they were in. I saw how, like, at what junctures they raised money. And sometimes I even got to meet the founders of these companies. And so that was very helpful as well. I mean, it just really, sometimes it inspired me, and then it also just kind of informed my thought process as I went about starting my own company. And then also, I think just that I had the fact that I worked at JPMorgan. I think people hear that and they think that that's a good thing, that you're a competent person. That's probably true a lot of time. And so I think that helps with when I was fundraising. It's a good credential to have.
Awesome. Yeah. Batman, how about you? Right, in the financial consulting realm.
Yeah.
What are your views on career in finance and maybe what it leads to, or staying there and what that leads to, or what that means?
So what I've seen in my company, typically a lot of people do, is I came in without really any quant skills, but on the job I've picked up a bit of coding and become a little more technical. And because of that, I've seen people go into tech a lot more, or the other options continue down into management consulting or go work at one of the client banks. So those are the three main options. But I think at the end of the day, like, for a lot of you, your first job out of college, you probably don't know what you want to do. And some of you, know exactly what you want to do. And if you figure out along the way, most people do that. If you figure out what you're doing out of college is not exactly what you want to be doing, it's very low stakes. A lot of opportunities to learn outside of the job and develop the skills that you realize for the job that you want. So I wouldn't worry too much about, exit opportunities on your first job. Like, at the end of the day, I've seen people go from consulting finance to med school, right, within 2-3 years out of college. So if you figure out something you really want to do at the end of the day, especially today, everything is, I wouldn't worry too much about it. And if it's something that you really want, I think you'll probably go and do it. So
I think that's a great bit of advice, and probably the biggest truth of all, right? Where you are or what you're doing does not mean or indicate what you have to do or what comes next. And I think that's the biggest truth, is that you're in control of the choices you make, whether it's leaving a firm like JPMorgan to start your own business or going from a finance firm to med school, right? Keep that in mind, that you make the decisions and you create your path. Ultimately, I think now is a good time to just open up to general questions, and we'll wrap up, by the top of the hour. Batman, let you get a quick nap in before your day starts or whatever comes next. So thank you for being here. Let everyone get back to their days. So if you have any questions specifically for any of the three panelists about anything they've talked about or anything we haven't talked about, now's a great time to ask and dive a little deeper.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So for either of you, was there anything that you did while in college, whether it was a class or an activity, that really helped prepare you for your current job? I know, Batman, you touched on this a little earlier with your econ degree.
Yeah, I would say for stage core is probably main answer to that, but the other one, my degree, I didn't really expect to use it at all, but there have been times where, the concepts that I've learned have come in handy. I think Courtney mentioned like a basic stats course, just being familiar with, how patterns in numbers work. But I don't think there's really a single thing that really, like, college is really just setting you up for the type of thinking, the critical thinking, and hopefully client interaction, like social interaction, that you'll be doing on the job. So.
Awesome. Courtney, go ahead.
I think having looked at a million resumes now, it's like there's too much pressure once again in college on like doing the right activities and getting into the right clubs or whatever, especially in my school. Like I look at resumes for like 30 seconds and I pick out a few interesting things and that's all I know. And so I think doing things that you're actually interested in is more important than doing the right things, and doing things that you're actually interested in and then sticking with those. Like it's cooler to see if I find something on your resume that I think is interesting and then I see you did it for all 4 years, I'm like, oh, they actually cared about that and were interested. Versus like, I think there's this like mentality that you need to try to do every club and be involved in every activity, and that's just not at all the case. The only like actual college thing that I think was helpful was like basic stats classes, like I said, and that just depends on what job you're going into, but for markets in particular, it was really helpful for me to do basic stat. But yeah, I don't think there's any like specific activity. I think just doing things you're interested in is way more relevant and interesting. And once again, going back to interviews, they have your resume in front of you. If you can like talk about and be passionate about something you did, then it's way more cooler than having done like the right finance club.
Awesome. Any other questions? Eli, if you have anything additional, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, don't feel obligated to just talk. Any other questions for the panelists? Anything else you all want to learn about? Take silence for a no. Now's the time, or hold your peace. Cool. Kevin, yeah, you have another?
Yeah. Well, kind of like a follow-up to that, like just giving some background, the reason why I asked that was because currently I'm trying to decide, and I know this may not be as relevant for some of the older people here, but I'm trying to decide whether an econ major is useful at all. So I originally thought like my original conception of econ is like it's directly related to finance, right? Knowing nothing about econ. And then I took an econ course, which was micro, and I figured that, hey, look, like nothing of this is really helping me at all. So I was just wondering whether, taking econ courses, majoring in econ, learning all this theoretical stuff is really going to be helpful at all.
You guys can answer this, right. But Batman, why don't you jump from an econ perspective, but I'll have this 2 cents really quickly, is that it's important to consider in college that every class you're taking and things you're learning is about learning how to think as much as it is the actual material. Yeah. And so it's important to consider that. So yes, if you get too granular, you'll be like, what's a widget? I don't care. But it's about learning how to solve problems and taking that skill set and applying it to problems in your real life. Maybe not to steal the thunder, but I feel like, all of us who have been through school and in the career, that's kind of what you end up taking away. You don't remember the core exercises of your classes and say, oh, I remember I did that. Now I'm doing it here. It's, I learned how to solve that problem, and it's manifesting in a different way in this environment. So if you have anything additional as an econ major.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. It's like that. I've just been on projects where some of the stuff has been coming handy, and that was surprising to me. And the other thing I'd say is like, I've seen people who were, you know, film majors go into consulting and finance because they were able to tell the story of you know, my visual, like I've developed my visual storytelling skills, and that'll help with, you know, pitch to X context. Like, at the end of the day, if you're really interested in something, it's in college and moving forward, and being deliberate about how you weave that into the story about yourself and the certain decisions you've made along the way. Like, let's say first job out of college, you don't like it, you move to another job, and that shows up on your resume, and being able to say, okay, I made this decision because of X, Y, Z, and that's a lot stronger than, you know, not having that, I guess.
Yeah, quick second on all of that. My best friend was trying to do econ for a few years and absolutely hated it and wasn't getting anything out of her classes because she just, like, in one ear out the other, she didn't like it. In her sophomore year, she switched to literature and absolutely loved it, and then ended up getting an investment banking job at Goldman because she had this unique experience that she was passionate about. So, like, once again, no one changed their major because I'm saying this, but do things you're actually interested in. It's just, like, you'll get so much more out of your education, and it'll translate in interviews.
Yeah. And I'll say, I studied economics when I first got to Northwestern as well, during my freshman year. And then I ended up switching my major to history, which was a subject that I was much more interested in. And yeah, a lot of times the interviewers want me to explain, like, how that was going to be applicable to the role. But as long as you're able to do that effectively, yeah, I would encourage you to study whatever it is that you're interested in, Kevin.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice, really. And the key takeaway here is, you know, when you put yourself in a position where you're interested in the thing, you don't know what's going to reveal yourself to you, but you're in a frame of general interest, and usually things come into your life that align with that versus trying to fit your life into the mold that you think you should be going down. So keep all this in mind as you, Kevin, decide what you're majoring, or others, think about what your story is behind your major, how you're going to tell that. But I think the advice that was just given is a great place to wrap up and take moving forward. So thank you all again for attending. Batman, Eli, Courtney, thank you, all three of you. You know, it was a smaller group than we had anticipated, but I think it allowed for some nice conversation. So thank you so much. I hope students, you appreciated their advice. And let me know if I can help facilitate any introductions either way. But everyone have a great rest of your day.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jacob, and thank you to the rest of you.
Thanks, you guys. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.